he lived like he was supposed to live. God doesn't want us to not live a full life where we are. Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they lived full lives. Matter of fact, they lived pretty good lives because they got to live in the king's palace with him. God wants us to live where we are, but he does not want us to conform to the ways of our culture or the ways of the country that we're in. And we saw where Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they drew a line in the sand. You know, that was my main point. You must draw a line in the sand somewhere at some point, because our culture will want us and tries to get us to be like them. And Satan, that's one of his biggest tools, is to pressure us into wanting to be like the people around us. But God says, no, you're supposed to be a different people. You're supposed to draw a line and say, I cannot cross this line, no matter what it cost me. And we talked about, 2 weeks ago, we talked about what Daniel said and what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said to the people who said, well, we're going to kill you. And their comment, and it's a wonderful comment, and I hope that I start living this comment in my life and put it in my life. And they said, my God is able to take care of me through this. My God is able to save me from you. But if he chooses not to, and this is the best point, but if God chooses not to, doesn't matter. I'm still not going to cross this line. And that is so wonderful, isn't it? That comment. God is able to take care of us and save us from any affliction or any pain, suffering, and death on this earth. He is able to do that, isn't he? Do you have faith that he is able to take care of all that? But then, am I strong enough, and are you strong enough to say, but if he doesn't, it's still okay. I'm not crossing this line because he does not want me to cross this line. And so that's where we were last week. And I want to go to 1 Peter chapter 2. Yeah, there it is up there. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. That's where we were. First Peter chapter 2, verse 9. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. And then in verse 10, he talks about once you were not a people, but now you are a people of God. When you have put on Christ in baptism, when you have said, I dedicate my life to God, and I'm going to let Jesus live in my heart, and I'm going to let Jesus control and the Holy Spirit control what I do, I have now declared and made a covenant with God that I am a chosen person. I am now going to be different than what's around me. And so we must be ready for that and do that. Romans? Chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. Verse 2. And when I dedicate myself to God and I make a covenant with God, Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. Be transformed. What does that mean? That means that big semi running down the road then transform into this huge robot that can throw things and tear down buildings and all that. That's why that movie's called Transformers. Because it used to be a semi-truck running down the road, and then all of a sudden it just, and it's got head, arms, and guns and stuff. Be transformed. You've got to make your life something different than what it used to be. Transform, and how do you do this? By the renewing of what? Your spirit, your mind. You will not change, I will not change and be transformed if my mind doesn't transform. 2 Timothy chapter 4. 2 Timothy chapter 4. Second Timothy chapter 4, verse 18. This scripture here from Paul to Timothy is technically the same statement made by Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego back in Daniel chapter 1, 6, 3 and 6, I think it is. It is so awesome. The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely where? To this life on earth? No. He doesn't say the Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and you will still be living in this world. No. Where will the true rescue come from? From God to where? His heavenly kingdom. Now, granted, we are living in His kingdom right now on this earth, but Paul is saying, God can rescue me. He will rescue me. He might rescue me from the trials in this world, and I can continue living in this world. Or He may rescue me. I might lose my life here on this earth, but isn't that all the more better? I will be rescued to His heavenly kingdom. And that's the mindset, even here in the New Testament, as it was in Daniel. God is able to rescue me, but if He doesn't, okay, I'm still not going to cross this line that I've drawn. Now, remember, what we're talking about in this class is how are we going to live in Babylon? The church in Babylon. And the church has always been in Babylon. Because the church has always been, God's people has always been called, they've been called to be different than the culture we have to live in. We are strangers. We are slaves in this culture. Just like God's people in the Old Testament. The church has always been countercultural. The church has always been supposed to be different than the world that the church is living in. And that's what this class is about. I'm not talking about when we come in here and worship and things. I'm talking about when you and me are out where our feet meet the road every day. That's what we're talking about. How do we live outside these doors? And you've got to draw a line in the sand sometimes in your dealings with people, in your activities with people, that says this line will not be crossed because I am a child of God. Now, does everybody understand what we're talking about? Because I'm about to go into something that might push you a little bit more than you've ever been pushed. Okay? We're talking about living out there, and where do we draw this line? And we got to remember that line must be drawn because you have made a commitment and a pact with God that you're going to be different than the world around you. And so my next question, and I don't even know if James 1, where are those coming from? Why did I put those on there? It's not in my notes. But I typed them. My wife typed them, but I must have told her what to type, so. Oh, not yet. No, we're still right there. There we go. Were they on the other one? Nope, they're not. Okay. I don't even know. I'm going to have to pause. I'm stepping into my closet right here to look at James 1:5. Oh, I know where I'm going with that. Okay. Oh. Do I have 1 Corinthians 6:12 and Romans 14? Yeah, look at there. I don't think I want to go to James 1:5 yet. I think I want to go to 1 Corinthians 6. This is terrible. It would be nice if my notes matched my slide up there, wouldn't it? I know. Thank you. Okay. All right. Now my next question to you, after thinking about and knowing what we're talking about, outside these doors, where do you and I draw this line? Because this is the hard part. It's easy to say, y'all need to draw some lines, and I need to draw some lines and not cross those lines. Okay, well, that's the easy part, saying it. Now the question is, where do you draw that line? See, for a long time, and I could have been half listening, which I guarantee I was half listening when I was growing up, when my parents drugged me sometimes to church, to worship time, to Bible class time. And sometimes I half listened. But a lot of stuff that came from the pulpit that stuck with me, maybe I wasn't listening, as I said. Sounds real good, but there was no, okay, now how do you do that? Anybody ever remember those kind of preachings and Bible classes? Well, you don't need to do this, and you need to draw a line in the sand. You got to do this and do this. But they never said, okay, how do you do that? I was going, well, that's great, and I know I'm supposed to. I just don't know how. And so that's where we're going to go today. And the question I want to ask, and this is what might push you a little bit. The line I draw in the sand about something or something that I'm dealing with other people or interacting with other people outside these walls, can my line in the sand be different than your line in the sand in that same situation? And that's my question. Because I do feel like that a lot of times people, and me included, think we all, please don't hear me out. We all need to draw our lines in the same spot, and when I'm interacting with other people, I must react and do exactly like you would react in that same situation, et cetera, et cetera. Now, folks, is that possible? I don't think it's possible. My personality is strangely different than everybody else's personality. I understand. But you're right. Personalities are different. And every time you get in a situation and you say, this is the line I'm not going to cross, all right? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to touch on this. I'm going to go there. A lot of people don't like to go there. Well, I'm going there. Y'all know me. I'm just going to put it out there. Alcohol. Some people draw the line here because that's the commitment, and they've made a pact with God about in their dealings with alcohol, that they've drawn the line right here. Not one drop of alcohol is going to touch my mouth. And that's where they've drawn the line. Okay? And that's wonderful. Because if they have made that commitment to the Lord and they cross over that line, what have they done? They've broken that commitment and that contract they made with God. Because they know in the way they live and the people they interact with, that if they cross that line, people will then see them differently. Oh, I thought you were a God follower, and you made a commitment to God that you were not going to, and here you are, you're drinking. Okay? One person's drawn it here, but another person has drawn it here, where they have a drink of wine, a glass of wine at home with supper. And that's all they do with alcohol. They just drink a glass of wine at supper. Now, some of you may be struggling in your soul about some of these feelings you've had in the way you were brought up, et cetera, et cetera. That a Christian should never cross that line and touch one drop of alcohol. But I go back to, if you cross that line, will people see you differently because of the commitment and the pact and the contract that you've made with God? Right. Right. If I've said, as a Christian, I'm not going to drink one drop of alcohol, and people know that, and then you cross that line, then they'll be going, oh, you hypocrite. You hypocrite. You said you weren't going to because of your commitment to God. I know this is touchy, and it really pushes on some of this stuff. Now, please do not hear me advocating it's okay to go out there and drink. All right? I'm not advocating total, okay, let's just throw that away and we just all go. I'm not saying that, y'all. It's the underlying principle to the alcohol issue, okay? We had a guy come talk to us, a year and a half ago. Kyle, were you in that meeting? His ministry is in the streets and in the bars in New York City. You were there, weren't you? That was his ministry. He would go and minister to people in bars. Did he drink with his people that he was doing his ministry with? Yes, he did. He admitted, he says, yes, I have a beer with them. Because what does that do? That opened the door. Now, did he, of course, I don't know the way he lives, okay? But I'm assuming. And from talking to him that day, and of course, everybody can put on a show, I guess, but did he carry that too far and be stumbling out of that bar drunk? I don't think so. But Paul said, be all things to what? All people. And we're going to look at some of these other scriptures right here, talking about where are you going to draw the line on certain things that happen out there in Babylon? Okay? And so that's where I'm going with this, y'all. I'm not advocating, please. Don't. Craig's law said, he said we can go out there and go get drinking. If you don't drink any alcohol, what should you do? Continue to not drink alcohol. Okay? Please understand that, y'all. Your influence on people speaks volumes about your commitment to God and what you have promised God that you would do with your life. And if some of my friends, I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. If some of my friends see me out there buying a 6-pack, 8-pack, 12, I don't even know how big a pack there is now, but a pack of Coors Light, and walk out of there, you know what happened? They would go. Some of them, their old jaw would hit the, because I don't do that. All right? I don't. So that's the line I've drawn. But someone else, like the guy in New York who is doing wonderful ministry and bringing people to Christ, his line is different. His line is, I'm not going to get drunk with wine, with alcohol. That's his line. Because having a beer with a guy in a bar is the way to open the door for him to bring or preach Christ to that guy, the gospel, to that person. And folks, I'm not going to, you might, but I'm not faulting that he's drawn his line different than my line when it comes to alcohol. Okay? Does everybody understand that? You may fault him, and okay, and that's between you. But I'm trying to say that that's his ministry. That's his ministry. And people are coming to Christ because he will have a beer with them to open the door so he can plant the seed. So that's all I'm going to go with that. You and I may need to have long discussion after class because you'll be going, Craig, you're nuts. And that's okay. But I want you to understand that sometimes your line is different than mine and my line is different than yours because of our commitment we've made with God. And you know, there's a lot of times, he's having trouble with his lines, he said. Where is my line? And you know, in our lives, in some cases, and I'll be the first one to raise my hand, on certain situations, there was no line there. And I supposedly was wearing the name of Christ on my forehead and across my chest. And yet, there was no line there. I just, phew. But I drew a line on this, and I wasn't going to do this. But you know what, Craig? You should have drawn a line on this because of the road it took me down. And you're right. Where are my lines? And that's what we're going to go into. How do I figure out where my lines are? Let's go to 1 Corinthians 6:12. Paul is talking to this church in Corinth. Now remember, we're doing a long study about this letter to the church in Corinth. And man, it is awesome because this church was messed up. And I say the church was messed up. I'm talking about, when I say the church, the people in this congregation in Corinth were messed up. And that's what Rick's really pointing out to us in here. And how Paul still loved them even though they were messed up. And here in verse 12 in chapter 6, everything is permissible for me. And then he puts the caveat on it. But what? Not everything is proper. Not everything is beneficial. I can do, and what that tells me, now this is coming from the mouth of Paul, y'all. Paul, y'all. In this life, as a Christian, I can do anything that this life tells me I can do. Paul said that. Everything is permissible. But my commitment to God and the promise I've made God, because I have put him on in baptism, I have my sins nailed him to the cross so my sins could be forgiven, so I could be washed clean. Then that statement that everything is permissible changes into, I can do anything I want to, but because you've chosen to follow Christ, not everything is beneficial. Now, I want y'all to be thinking of my alcohol example. I can do anything is permissible with it. But it's not beneficial if it does what? If it shows people around me that I live just like they live in the culture around me. Okay? I'm just trying to... Everything is permissible for me, but I will not be what? Mastered by anything. And then he goes into food for the stomach, etc., and sexual immorality and all these other things. He's pointing out all these things are permissible. But you know what? Because I'm a Christian, it's not beneficial. So draw a line, Craig, right here. Draw a line right here. Because when people see you cross that line, they will then think, hypocrite, you're no different than I am. And yet you say, oh, you're a Christian. And again, that brings up, so where do I draw my line? And that line, it's kind of funny. On some of these things in my life, I'll draw a line with certain people here, but then with other people, that same thing, I draw it here. And why do I draw it in two different places? This guy doesn't know any better, and the guys I'm dealing with here know better. If someone sees me crossing the line right here, I need to draw the line here so I can reach this guy for Christ. Reach this person for Christ. Where this line, I can't go that far with this person to reach him for Christ. Am I getting too deep, or does everybody understand what I'm saying there? And so it all depends on the situation I'm in out in Babylon, where that line is drawn. Because here, I want to reach these people for Christ and be an example of Christ to them. Where this group of people, I can cross and go a little bit further with them, all in the name of I want to reach them for Christ. But I will not be mastered by anything that I'm doing. I will not be mastered by that because my master is Jesus Christ. And he's the one that helps me in this situation of drawing that line. So now where's Romans 14? Is that right? That's next? Romans 14. 1 through 19. Well, we may not read the whole thing. Well, we might have to, so I might read it pretty fast. This, again, we're talking about drawing that line now, y'all. Accept him whose faith is weak without passing judgment on disputable matters. Oh, man, places we can go on disputable matters. That means where you and I don't agree on something. In other words, where that line's drawn. All righty? Don't pass judgment on this. One man's faith allows him to eat everything, but another man's whose faith is weaker eats only vegetables. Vegan. I'm sorry. You got weak faith if you're a vegan. No, it's biblical right here. I'm sorry. Let's get back to the point. One man's faith allows him to draw a line here. Another man's faith, his line's drawn here. Do you see that technically that's what he's saying here? Or am I missing the boat? Of course, some of y'all think I done fell off the boat a long time ago, but that's all right. The man who eats everything must not look down on him who does not, and the man who does not eat everything must not condemn the man who does, for God has accepted him. Okay? God says he's okay. God says I'm okay. Where I've drawn my lines. Now again, we still got to go back and say, who is your master? Are you reaching people and planting the seed of Jesus Christ where your line has been drawn? It's the whole. What's your intention? What's your focus? Oh man, here we go. Let's keep going. Where was I? Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To his own master he stands or falls, and he will stand, for the Lord is able to make him stand. One considers one day more sacred than another. Another man considers every day alike. Each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. He who regards one day as special does so to the Lord. Do you understand what that says right there? Someone's line says this day is special because that is a day dedicated to the Lord for him. That's the line this guy's drawn. He who eats meat eats to the Lord, for he gives thanks to God, and he who abstains does so for the Lord and gives thanks to God. Someone says, I can't eat the meat because of my commitment to God. Another guy in the same church family can eat the meat because his line's drawn over here because of his commitment to God. His commitment is to who? God. Who is the master of the way you live? That's how you understand how you draw the line. Because is my whole life and what I'm doing committed and focused and given to God? And that's where I draw my line, because it's to the Lord. For none of us lives to himself alone, and none of us dies to himself alone. If we live to the Lord. If we die to the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. I've drawn my line here. I live for the Lord. Someone else draws their line here past where I would go. They go past what I would do, but they draw the line here. But they do it for the Lord. Okay, is everybody with me? I mean, are you following what I'm saying here? For this very reason, Christ died and returned to life so that he might be the Lord of both the line here and the line here. Okay? If you're reaching people for the Lord, but you go further than I would in a certain situation and drawing your line past where I would draw my line, but you are reaching people for the Lord, I'm not supposed to judge you for that because you went past where I would go. I said, I got to stop right here, because if I go any further, it will be detrimental to me and my relationship with God. But you might be able to go past where I stop and say, I can't go past this. It's further than you, but it's here. Because of my commitment, I'm doing it for the Lord. And, oh man. Whew. Or why do you look down on your brother? For we all will stand before God's judgment seat. There it is right there. I'm not going to judge you because you go further than where I've drawn my line. But if you go further than where I've drawn my line, and you are a bad influence for God, He will judge you for that. And if I've drawn the line here, which is not as far as you would go in a certain situation, but I do things and I cross that line, and people will see that, well, you're a hypocrite because you said you would never cross that line, and there you cross that line. And it's detrimental to my being Jesus to people and bringing people to Christ. I will be judged for that. That's what Paul's saying right here. So then each of us will give an account of himself to God. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Don't pass judgment on someone else's line in the sand than my line in the sand. There is a judge who will. Okay? There's a judge who will. I'm still going to have fellowship with you. But I will also say, be careful where you draw your line, because I don't want you to be a detriment to bringing people to Christ, planting the seed of the gospel to people. Go ahead, brother. Right. But again, I think you're saying that, you jump the line here, but you don't jump the line there. And I think it's the situation you're in and the people you're with. But at first, people have got to understand and see that you are Christ. Right? First, you must make a stance right here and saying, I'm a child of God. Now I'm going to start drawing my lines. I can't cross this line because of my commitment to God. But in a certain situation, my line's drawn here, but I can cross it in a certain situation to reach this person, like the guy I was talking about in New York, who goes into bars and has a beer just to open the door to teach people about Christ. And that's a second bell. I wanted to go to, what's 620 mean? Always remembering when you draw these lines, you are not your own. You are bought at a price. Honor God with your body. And I wanted to go to, where was it? James 1:5. James 1:5. We'll end with this one. I know the second bell rang and people want to come in, Lane. Tell them to come on in. We're going to James 1:5 and I'll be finished. Good night. I want to take 2 hours. Tell Rick I'm taking 2 hours today, all right? Folks, if you want help drawing the line in the sand where you're not going to cross, James 1:5, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should what? Talk to God. God, help me draw the line in the sand. God will give generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Ask God, He will help you draw your line in the sand. I'm not crossing this line. And help me when I have to cross that line to reach somebody that I'm still mastered by you. I love you guys. Sorry I went long.